Princess Kate had entered the room, expecting an ordinary private briefing. Instead, a sealed palace file was placed before her, and within minutes, everything changed. Buried inside was a final message written by Diana for Prince William. A message preserved for years, protected from public view, and never meant to surface under ordinary circumstances. Kate read the final lines twice. Then she stopped, because Diana had not simply spoken to her son. She had warned him about his future. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine sat frozen at Kensington Palace as the morning briefing became painfully personal. The archival palace document, a restricted family record preserved inside the royal collection, had been released under instructions tied to Diana's private correspondence. These papers were never meant for ceremony or public display. They carried private thoughts and instructions for those closest to her. Catherine turned another page, and the meaning became impossible to escape. Diana had written directly to William about the future he might inherit. She urged her eldest son to protect his family from being swallowed by royal duty, and warned him never to let the crown destroy the emotional safety of the woman beside him. The words struck Catherine with brutal force. She lowered the page, asked the aide to leave, and listened as the door closed. Diana had never met her, yet the message felt painfully personal. William entered soon afterward, and stopped when he saw the handwriting. The prince did not ask where the file came from. He already knew. His face tightened. "How much did you read?" he asked. Catherine looked at him without answering. That question changed everything, because it revealed something she had never expected. He knew the message existed. For Kate, that realization cut deeper than secrecy. Kate felt shock turn into hurt. William had carried part of Diana's warning through years of marriage, public duty, family pressure, and private decisions, yet he had never shown her the complete words. He admitted there was a reason. He believed silence was protection. Catherine now understood that his mother's message had not simply remained inside an archive. It had been living inside her husband, quietly shaping choices she thought belonged only to them. William finally sat opposite her and said the explanation began years earlier, during a royal moment when Diana's warning stopped feeling like memory and started feeling like prophecy. Kate thought the hardest revelation was what Diana had written, but his silence suggested something even more painful. This message had already shaped decisions inside their marriage long before Catherine knew it existed. For Catherine, Diana had always been both deeply present and permanently absent. Her photographs filled royal history. Her influence followed William everywhere. Yet Kate could never ask the one woman whose life most closely mirrored the path she herself was walking, what that path might cost. Now, decades later, Diana's voice had reached her through a page, and what she said made Kate question how much William had been protecting her from all along. Catherine kept eyes on the letter while William remained close, unable to escape what it represented. The royal family, the sovereign and close relatives who carry out duties on behalf of the crown, surrounded their marriage with history and expectation. Kate understood that before marrying him. What she never understood was how deeply Diana's pain still lived inside her son, influencing his instinct to protect the life they had built. Kate finally told William the message was impossible to read. Diana seemed to have anticipated the pressure that would one day surround the woman beside him, and that realization brought comfort and grief at once. Catherine admitted she felt seen by someone she had never met, yet she also felt wounded, because those words had been known to her husband while she faced pressure without knowing the warning existed. William turned away before answering. The prince paused, then admitted his deepest fear was never public criticism or duty. It was becoming the kind of husband who allowed the institution to consume the woman he loved. He had watched his mother suffer under that weight, and he had spent adulthood resisting the idea that his marriage might fall into the same emotional pattern. Still, keeping Diana's message private had created another kind of distance. Catherine read further and found something. Diana had not asked her son to reject monarchy. She had urged him to change it from within. to become king without surrendering tenderness, honesty, or the safety of his home. Kate looked back at William and understood why those words had haunted him. Then she noticed one paragraph was underlined in pencil. William did not deny. He admitted he had marked that passage years earlier, after a palace incident forced him to choose between institutional expectation and Catherine's well-being. A documented private account, preserved with the correspondence, recorded that decision and his reaction afterward. Kate asked what had happened. He hesitated, then said senior advisors had once pushed for a change that could have altered the course of their family life. The message was no longer merely Diana's farewell to her son. It had become a map of William's deepest fears, and one marked line was about to reveal when those fears first became real. Years before Catherine ever saw Diana's message, William had already discovered how quickly royal duty could enter a marriage and begin making decisions for the people inside it. It happened behind closed doors, after what should have been a routine palace discussion. One suggestion, delivered calmly across a table, forced him to remember words his mother had left behind. From that moment onward, Diana's warning stopped being a memory. It became something William believed he had to obey. William had been given access years earlier to part of his mother's private correspondence, but he kept those words locked inside himself. The correspondence was a collection of personal letters and written instructions preserved for family access, not public ceremony. He told himself that carrying the burden alone protected Catherine. Yet as their duties expanded, palace planners began treating the couple's household as essential to the monarchy's future, increasing demands on their time, appearances, and private family space. The turning point came after a major state ceremony at Windsor. Senior advisors gathered with William and proposed sharply expanding Catherine's independent schedule while cutting into protected family time. The prince listened until one phrase from Diana returned with brutal clarity: "The institution will always ask for one more piece of the person you love." He said almost nothing in the room, but the warning had already changed the decision forming inside him. Catherine later sat exhausted after the ceremony, slowly removing the jewelry she had worn through hours of duty. William found her there and asked whether she could handle more engagements. Kate answered that she could manage. Her calmness frightened him. He had seen that same determination in memories of Diana pushing through strain, and suddenly, his wife's strength felt less reassuring than dangerous. William acted quietly afterward. He rejected several proposed engagements, shortened others, and protected family days without explaining the deeper reason. Catherine noticed. She sometimes read his interference as overprotective, never realizing childhood fear stood behind it. That night, he returned to Diana's message and underlined the sentence Kate had now discovered years later. The mark became a private promise. Royal expectation would never be allowed to consume his family. Kate finally understood the pattern, but understanding brought no relief. William had not been acting randomly. He had been obeying a warning from his mother. Yet Catherine also saw the cost. Decisions about her life had been shaped by words she was never invited to read. And now, for the first time, she was ready to challenge the protection that had governed them. Understanding William's motive did not erase her hurt. Instead, it sharpened it, because love had protected her, but secrecy had excluded her. The confrontation was not loud at first. That made it worse. Catherine placed Diana's message carefully on the table between them, looked directly at William, and asked why a letter influencing years of their marriage had been kept from her. There were no advisors in the room, no cameras, and nowhere for either of them to retreat into royal formality. For once, the future king was not answering as an heir. He was answering as a husband. Catherine understood that fear, not cruelty, had driven his silence. But understanding did not remove the damage. The message was part of Diana's private correspondence, meaning personal letters and written instructions preserved for family access rather than public use. William had treated those words as something inherited by him alone. He admitted he feared showing Kate would force her to live beneath the shadow of a woman she never knew. Kate pushed the page toward him. "You protected me from a warning that was also about me." William started to answer, then stopped. The prince knew there was no easy defense. Catherine had carried royal pressure, family responsibility, and public judgment beside him for years. If Diana's warning had influenced decisions affecting that life, then Kate believed she had deserved the truth before those decisions were made. William finally admitted what frightened him most. He had feared Catherine would read his mother's words and begin measuring their marriage against the collapse of his parents' relationship. He wanted her to have a story untouched by that tragedy. He wanted their home to feel like theirs, not another chapter in an old royal wound. Yet the harder he tried to protect that independence, the more secrecy entered the marriage. Catherine returned to one sentence. Diana had written that love could become dangerous when protection turned into control. Kate asked whether William had ever noticed the contradiction. He had used his mother's warning to shield his wife, while withholding the very truth that would have allowed her to choose alongside him. The question landed hard. He did not argue. William lowered his voice and acknowledged it. His mother's warning had shaped him so deeply that avoiding one mistake had pushed him toward another. He had not repeated the past exactly, but fear had still made decisions for them. Before Catherine could answer, a private palace call interrupted the room. A senior royal had been informed that the document was now open, and officials wanted immediate control over its handling. William and Catherine had finally begun speaking without barriers, but outside that room, the institution Diana had warned about was already moving to reclaim control of the very words that had exposed their silence. By afternoon, Diana's message was no longer simply a private matter between husband and wife. Senior palace figures had learned the archival file was open, and concern spread quickly, not because the message contained scandal in the traditional sense, but because it carried something perhaps more dangerous: Diana's judgment about how royal duty could damage a family. Charles was informed privately. He read the summary in silence, set it down, and immediately understood why the document could reopen wounds nobody had truly buried. Charles remained alone after the briefing, staring at the page before removing his glasses and placing them beside it. The archival file, a protected collection of records kept for family or institutional access rather than ordinary public release, had become more than paperwork. Diana's words challenged a culture that had long expected sacrifice in the name of duty. For the king, that meant confronting his failed marriage, William's childhood, Catherine's position, and the future monarchy all at once. William rejected the first recommendation immediately. Palace officials wanted the message returned to restricted archives before Catherine could keep a personal copy, but the prince refused. He argued that Diana had written those words for family, not for palace management. Catherine stood beside him, uneasy that she had become central to a battle involving a woman she had never met. Still, Kate would not allow the message to be treated like a public relations problem that could simply be locked away. Charles asked to speak with his son privately. In a recorded palace account of that conversation, the monarch admitted Diana had voiced similar fears during their marriage. She had warned him directly that royal duty could hollow out the emotional life of a family if every private need was treated as secondary. William listened without interrupting. The revelation mattered because it proved the written message was not a passing moment of anger. It reflected something his mother had believed deeply. Catherine watched the balance shift. William was no longer merely defending a letter, he was challenging the instinct to control uncomfortable history. The future king made clear that Kate would receive a copy, and that Diana's intention would not be erased by procedure. For Catherine, the significance was unmistakable. Her husband was prepared to resist palace convention in order to protect the meaning of his mother's final words. And she understood that this fight was no longer about preserving Diana's memory alone. It was about deciding what kind of royal family they intended to become. The document had begun as a private wound, but William's decision transformed it into something larger, a test of whether the future monarchy would preserve old habits or finally break them. By the next morning, the atmosphere around William and Catherine had changed. Meetings were shortened, calls were redirected. Courtiers spoke more carefully. Yet the greatest consequence was not institutional, it was personal. Kate had spent the night thinking about a woman she could never meet, and a warning she could no longer unread. When William found her the following morning, the document was beside her. She was no longer crying. That unsettled him more than tears would have. Catherine sat with untouched tea as the copied passage rested beside her. The palace had already tightened handling procedures around Diana's document, meaning stricter rules now governed who could read, copy, or move the protected family record. Officials wanted the matter contained as private history. William's refusal to treat it as simple archival material had created friction, because sensitive royal records were usually controlled through restricted access, not personal interpretation. Kate looked at her husband and said she had made a decision. Diana's words would not become another burden silently carried from one generation to the next. William listened carefully. The prince had spent years believing silence could shield the people he loved, but Catherine now challenged that belief directly. She told him she did not want to be saved from his mother's fate. She wanted partnership, even when the truth was painful. William finally admitted what he had rarely put into words. Diana's death had left him constantly searching for signs that history might repeat itself inside his own family. He watched pressure. He watched exhaustion. He watched every moment Catherine seemed willing to push herself too far. Kate suddenly understood that much of his protectiveness was not royal strategy at all. It was the reflex of a grieving son still trying to prevent an old tragedy from returning. Catherine reached for the copied page and offered a different path. Instead of hiding Diana's warning, they could use it privately as a principle for their household and for the future reign they might one day shape together. The future reign meant the period when William would serve as king, and Catherine beside him, carrying greater responsibility for the monarchy. Kate wanted their children protected from the idea that duty must always come before emotional well-being. William agreed, but his expression changed before the conversation could settle. He asked Catherine to turn to the final handwritten paragraph. Neither of them had spoken its words aloud. Kate hesitated, then placed her finger beneath the first line. Everything now depended on the last paragraph, because Diana had saved her most personal instruction for the end, and William had spent years avoiding what it demanded from him. There was no palace secretary beside them when William finally unfolded the last page. No advisor explained what Diana meant. No institution stood between mother and son. Catherine sat opposite her husband as he traced the handwriting he had known since childhood. Then Kate began reading. Diana's final instruction was strikingly simple. When the demands of royalty and the emotional safety of his family collided, William must remember that the crown existed to serve people, not consume the people who wore it. William listened without interrupting as Catherine continued. They had chosen to read the final passage alone because the message had become buried beneath palace arguments, access rules, and questions of control. The crown, the institution representing the monarch and royal authority, was not presented by Diana as something her son should abandon. Her words demanded something harder. He should inherit responsibility, without allowing that responsibility to hollow out the private lives of the people closest to him. William finally admitted how badly he had misunderstood the warning. The prince had spent years believing protection meant shielding Catherine from pressures before they reached her. He had reduced schedules, challenged advisors, and carried fears in silence because he thought that was what Diana wanted. Kate answered gently. His mother had not asked him to stand between his wife and reality. She had asked him to trust the woman beside him enough to face that reality together. Catherine reached across and took his hand. She told William that Diana's words still left her torn. They exposed pain that could never be repaired, but they also gave language to fears the couple had struggled to name. Kate could finally understand why he watched pressure so closely and why ordinary royal demands sometimes triggered an emotional response far deeper than the moment itself. For the first time, his fear no longer felt like a wall between them. William looked down as Catherine reached the final line. Diana's clearest instruction was not about appearances, popularity, or perfect duty. She told her son never to measure the success of his future reign by how flawlessly his family performed, but by whether they remained emotionally whole. The words changed his understanding instantly. Preserving his mother's legacy did not mean preventing every hardship. It meant refusing to sacrifice honesty, intimacy, and humanity simply to protect an image. The breakthrough should have brought relief. Instead, a private call shattered the stillness. Diana's message had leaked beyond palace walls, and the public was beginning to hear fragments of the warning. For the first time, Diana's message brought William and Catherine closer, rather than pulling them apart. But beyond the palace gates, those same words were about to become a national conversation. The story broke before breakfast. Within hours, Diana's private warning to William had moved from a restricted palace file into headlines across Britain. Yet the reaction was not dominated by scandal. It was dominated by recognition. Millions remembered a woman who had once spoken openly about emotional isolation inside royal life. Now her words seemed to have reached forward across decades, directly into the marriage of her eldest son and the woman destined to stand beside him. Catherine saw the first front page in private, and felt the old comparison close around her again. News coverage was treating Diana's experience and Kate's modern royal role as part of the same emotional story. Kensington Palace, the London royal residence, closely associated with William, Catherine, and Diana, had become the focus of public attention. Outside its gates, people gathered with flowers and handwritten cards, while one newspaper carried side-by-side photographs beneath the headline, "Her Final Warning to William." Kate did not celebrate the sympathy. She told William she could not bear the idea of the public turning their marriage into a repeat of his mother's tragedy. Catherine had spent years trying to build her own identity inside royal life, and now one leaked message threatened to pull her back beneath Diana's shadow. The prince listened, then answered with unexpected calm. "Perhaps," he said, "the comparison could finally show what had changed, rather than what had repeated." William's response shifted the tone inside the palace. Communications officials avoided attacking Diana's words, because dismissing them would only deepen public sympathy for both mother and son. A palace response, a formal statement issued on behalf of the royal household, confirmed that he regarded his mother's guidance as deeply personal, and that the Wales household remained committed to protecting family life, alongside public service. The statement did not publish Diana's full message. It did something more subtle. It acknowledged the principle behind it. Catherine read the response before release and understood the significance. William was allowing the institution to recognize a lesson it once might have buried. Kate still felt exposed, but she no longer felt powerless. The message had moved beyond scandal and into something larger, a public measure of whether the future monarchy could learn from private suffering. The headlines would fade, the flowers would be removed, but William and Catherine now faced the decision Diana's words had forced into the open. They could preserve the lesson as private comfort, or let it reshape the royal life their children would inherit, and someday remember for generations ahead. Public fascination had given her warning enormous power, but its true meaning would be decided somewhere quieter, in the choices they made after everyone else stopped talking. Diana's message could have become another royal wound. It could have divided William and Catherine, reopened Charles's deepest regrets, and reduced a mother's final words to one more palace controversy. Instead, it forced something far more important into the open. William finally confronted the fear he had carried since childhood. Kate finally understood the hidden source of decisions that had shaped their marriage. And together, they transformed Diana's warning from a prophecy of pain into a promise that history would not repeat itself. William made his position clear in the days that followed. Diana's message would remain inside his personal family archive, a protected collection of private records preserved for those directly connected to them, and Catherine would never again be excluded from its meaning. The palace quietly stopped treating the matter as a crisis. What had begun as a struggle over control was becoming something harder to contain, a family decision about how the future monarchy would live. Charles accepted that decision without another confrontation. The king understood that Diana's words now belonged to the generation preparing to carry the crown forward. His withdrawal was quiet, but significant. William no longer needed permission to decide what lesson he would take from his mother's pain, and Catherine no longer stood outside that emotional inheritance. Kate told her husband privately that the warning no longer frightened her. It entrusted her. Diana, without ever knowing the woman her son would marry, had given them permission to choose each other when royal duty became overwhelming. William answered with an apology. The prince admitted that fear had shaped choices that should have been shared. Catherine accepted his words, but made one thing clear: their future would be built on partnership, not protection through silence. William and Catherine then agreed on a private family principle. Royal responsibility would never automatically outrank emotional well-being, their marriage, or the stability of their children. That promise mattered because it transformed Diana's warning from painful history into a practical rule for the household they were still building. William folded the letter carefully, then paused. Instead of returning it to the archival box, he handed it to Catherine. Kate held the page before placing it beside a family photograph. The meaning was unmistakable. Diana's memory was no longer something he had to guard alone. The document had arrived carrying the weight of the past, but when William and Catherine finally put it down together, Diana's message had become something entirely different. Not a shadow over their future, but the reason they were determined to protect it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.